Good evening and welcome to Lockdown Oboe Solo Concert number 8. I hope you are all hanging in there. This lockdown is getting pretty old and the news on the internet is not so wonderful, but it's important that we keep doing what we're supposed to do and hopefully look to some better things. In this past week, I had the amazing opportunity to play live in public with a pianist. Yes, we were like 12 feet across the stage from each other, but that was an amazing experience for me. I got to play with Michael Shepard. That was really fun. I did a bunch of yard work. That was really nice. I found my first ever morel mushroom in the wild. We did some online school in my house. We don't need to talk about that. I attended a Zoom funeral, which is actually surprisingly nice and better than you might think. And I recorded an oboe and piano cover of Dolly Parton's Jolene. So that's what I've been up to since the last time I played a concert a week ago. Unfortunately, the weather is still very rainy again on Friday night, and it looks like my internet upload speeds are terrible right now. So I don't know that there's anything more that I can do, but just play and hope it comes across. To continue with my survey of the Telemann fantasies, I am on number 9 of 12. I don't really need to say much more about these at this point, but I do really particularly love this one. I want to point out the first movement, Affettuoso. That means loving or affectionately. That's a quite unusual marking, especially from this time. You don't see a lot of that. Also, the proportions of this one are a little different, a little bit unusual. And for me, I love E major. It might be one of my favorite keys. This might sound crazy, but it's a very vivid color for me. It's very beautiful, rich, dark green. That either sounds totally crazy or totally normal, depending on how your brain works. Anyway, this is Fantasy number 9 in E major. Okay, it's super rainy and windy here. Super rainy and windy here. I hope it's working. Anyway, when I put an internet call out at the beginning of this solo oboe project for more ideas about solo oboe pieces, because I needed more to fill these 11 programs, I put a little thing on the internet saying, hey, help me find some great oboe solo pieces, and I'm especially looking for works by women because I don't have that many of them. And this one was suggested to me, and I got in touch with Alejandra Odgers, and she sent me this piece, and I was immediately taken by it. It sits very well for the instrument, it's fun to play, and it actually probably is that way because she studied the oboe when she was younger, in addition to percussion and piano. So this piece is an early work of hers, right at the end of her student years, written in 1996, and here is Alejandra Odgers talking about Semelíami.
Semelíami is a word from a native American people. It's in the people that lives in the frontier between the United States and Mexico. It's the Raramuri people, and Semelíami means music to be dance. So it was, well, the name I put it because when I wrote this piece, I had in mind two ideas or two images. Yes. One was like someone that starts like kind of meditating or very calm, and then if the spirit or something starts dancing and moving and dancing, making a dance, and then returning to that calm spirit. And the other image, it was more like the snake charmer or something, so that we start playing, and then the snake is coming out, then it dances, and then it returns to the basket.
Yeah, that's a very oboe sort of thing. Everybody thinks.
Yes.
Snake charming.
Yes. So that I start the piece having those ideas. So for me, it was a kind of a dance. So when I found about this name Semelíami, that is a piece meant to be dance or something like that. So I decided to put this title.
Cool. And you're from Mexico originally?
Yes. I'm Mexican. Well, I was born in Mexico. When I finished my studies in composition in Mexico, then I came to Canada, to Montreal, to study a master's degree and a PhD degree, and then I stay here. I have now my family here, so I'm Mexican Canadian.
Yeah. So Phil Popham, the composer of the next piece, tells a very charming story about how he wrote this piece in 2006 for an oboist whom he will not name, for their protection. And if you want to know more about that, there's a little video on my Facebook page if you're curious. But the short version is Phil showed up to the recital where this piece was programmed to be premiered, and the oboist basically left him at the altar and announced from the stage, despite the written program, that they would not play this piece because it was too hard. I just want to say Phil shouldn't feel too bad about that, because the very iconic piece for the oboe by Robert Schumann, the Three Romances, Opus 94, have a similar story, and the oboist could not play those, and they were never played on the oboe during Schumann's life. They were only played on the violin. So anyway, Phil gave the premiere himself about a year later. He describes it because no one else would do it. And Phil also thinks that I may be the only person besides him to be playing it in public, if you call this public. It certainly feels like public. I was really also, like the Odgers, quite taken by it when I first read through it a few weeks ago. There are a couple funny items from the score that I feel are worth mentioning. One is the piece is dedicated to Anna Minster, and Anna Minster is not a real person, and sort of part of a joke, and it's a quite funny story that he also tells on my Facebook page, but it is related to being left at the altar at the premiere. The second is that he gives a practice suggestion, and when composers are giving practice suggestions for their piece, that's always a little iffy, but his suggestion is to make a dartboard with his face on it to deal with certain passages in this piece, and presumably that's related to this mystery of what happened at the premiere. And that's all I know is what's on my Facebook page and what I just told you. Anyway, Phil lives in LA now and has a very interesting and varied career. We've collaborated twice recently in some kind of ridiculous oboe pop things, videos, but we both went to Baltimore School for the Arts in the last century. So this piece by Phil describes the idea of being lonesome, and he'll talk about it a little bit, but how you can be surrounded by people and still lonely, and how you can be alone but still fulfilled. And he's going to describe each of the movements next here. We're talking about the first movement, and you call that threes a crowd, and the whole piece is three lonesome places. And it's very interesting because you have this sort of noodly voice that you're talking about, which is actually two people.
Yeah, so it starts with a high voice and a low voice. But of course, lucky for you, you get to be all characters in this little oboe opera. So the high voice and the low voice are just talking back and forth, very leisurely, like nothing else is going on. Sometimes it's more animated, sometimes it's not. And the melody the slow lyrical melody, lyrical in quotes, that starts on D, that's sort of the third person listening, and their voice kind of not being involved at all in what else is going on. So as they get progressively more angry and frustrated that they're sitting there as the third wheel, the other two voices, their conversations start to get a little bit more crossed over, so it just sort of becomes a bit of a nuisance almost, where you can't pick out who's even talking anymore and what they're saying, because you're just in that frame of mind now.
So tell me about the second movement, In the Darkness.
Okay, so In the Darkness, this was kind of right out of my childhood. I used to sit up at night. I had a second floor. My bedroom was on the second floor of an apartment building, and it looked out to a restaurant in New Orleans called Frankie and Johnny's, which is still around. And it was kind of like it was a really good restaurant. It had like, fried seafood and things like that in good New Orleans style. So at about 4 a.m, I was always sort of a night owl. At 4 a.m, if you would look out of my window, you would see a few things. You would see there'd be one guy hosing down the parking lot with a hose. There'd be one small light on in the kitchen door, which was open with a hose coming out of it, and he'd be hosing down the parking lot because everything was shut down, and he was just kind of clearing everything out. All alone out there, middle of the night. Then you would have the stars above you, which are kind of those little staccato passages, and then the sort of crazy bursts of energy in there. This was a really bizarre thing. About a block away, behind some tall buildings, was a port for ships, and there was a boat, a giant barge called the Tapiola that I looked it up on when I was a kid, and apparently it was taking whiskey from Norway to New Orleans to Panama, I think.
Nice.
So, but yeah, and so it would dock outside of my window. So you have this pitch black 4 a.m. piece, but just through the breaks of some buildings, you can see all of this light and motion peeking out. And you know that just on the other side of that, there's a whole city of people that's just working like mad through the night, getting the cargo on and taken off. And you can just see glimmers of it, through the breaks of the buildings.
Excellent. And how about In My Mind, the last movement?
So in my mind, if someone was to look into my mind, sort of the image I always have when I say, oh, I'm going to think about something, you kind of enter this bright white room with incredibly colorful confetti of thousands of thoughts just flying around in all directions. And that's kind of what I always think of it looking like when you enter my mind and my thought processes. So that's the opening and the closing, because you're entering in and then you're leaving at the end. And so the middle sections, there are these little bitty, it's almost like a little slideshow of sometimes of 8 bars, sometimes of 1 bar. It's just these little bitty things. And that's almost like if you grabbed one of the confettis and looked at it for a second and then threw it out and grabbed another one and looked at it. Like, I never felt lonely at those times, which is why I call them lonesome, because, you can be completely alone and feel very great and not be lonely at all. And you can be with a group of people and feel terribly lonely.
So thank you again for listening tonight. It's been my privilege to get to share music with you in your homes, from my home. If you enjoyed this concert, please share it with your friends if they might enjoy it also. And I wish everyone a happy Mother's Day, including my own mother, whom I love very much. Hi, Mom. Everybody stay safe, please. Don't hang out with lots of people. And I'll be back next week, Friday at 7:30, with Telemann Fantasie No. 10 of 12 in F sharp minor, and some other music that I have mostly nailed down, but I will announce officially on Facebook once I am totally convinced. So with that, I wish